Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. Welcome back to everyone. This is Own Your Gifts, Season 3, Episode 1. I have my legendary co-host with me, Joey Pilaro. Over the next 30 minutes, we're going to sort of showcase some of the tips, tricks, and hacks around plugging into the higher forces of gratitude. And we also have a very special guest joining us from Seattle, Ty, who we're going to bring onto the show in a minute. How you doing, Joey?
I'm doing great. It's so good to hear that jingle. It's been a couple weeks. It's good to see you, and this is I missed it. I missed the last 2 weeks, and tonight we have an inspirational guest, and that's what we love to do. Like, we love to spotlight people who have defied the odds, and who overcome adversity and come out the other side, not only growing but contributing beyond themselves. And Ty is an amazing example of that. So we're really grateful to be able to showcase him here tonight.
If you guys are joining us for the first time, welcome. This is Own Your Gifts, Season 3, our Episode 1. Please let us know in the comments of where you're joining us from. And we look forward to the next half an hour showcasing. Basically, our format for our Season 3 is like what it was like back then and what it's like now. Let's bring Ty on the show, mate. Hello, welcome, Ty from Seattle. How are you, brother?
I'm well. Glad to be here with you guys.
So good to have you on. I was just saying to the boys, like, we've got two guests here from America, and I love that opportunity that we have now to connect with people all over the world via Zoom.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah, and guys, sorry, I should have said, if you're joining us again, and you've been one of those amazing people who continue to support us, send us beautiful messages, please also drop your comments and let us know where you're watching from. Joey, we always kick this show off with something, and we don't want to change it. Something that you did well today and something that you could possibly do better tomorrow, Joey. So I'm going to get you to kick us off with that, mate.
Beautiful. I love this part of the show, and it's always good to keep my feet grounded in reality, and to be looking at both sides of the coin. For me today, what I did well is I've been on a sugar binge, man, for like the past 4 weeks. And, that affects me horribly. And I recommitted to eating healthy. And it's been day 4 of, completely compliant to my eating plan, which includes no inflammatory food. So I feel really, really good about that. There was a time where I felt like in recent weeks where I felt like I was spiraling out of control. I felt a lot like it feels to be like, that the drugs that have the hold of you, or alcohol have the hold of you. And when we're talking about sugar, it's really not much different for me. So that's what I did well. And what I can do better tomorrow, and this is probably something I can mention every single week, is not take things personally. What people say or what people do has nothing to do with me. And somebody in my family said something to me, and I didn't like it, and I took it personal. And it's probably had nothing to do with me. It probably just that they were having a bad day and they were venting, or even if it was a personal attack. I need to learn to not take things personally, because if I take everything personally, I can't have any peace of mind.
Wonderful, Joey. Thanks so much for sharing. The eating thing is such a big thing for you and I. Absolutely, so well done with that. The last 24 hours, I want to just mention that I've done extremely well, and this is always important to acknowledge the things we do well today. This sort of helps us to move forward and continue being great. But I've been really motivated around my business stuff that I do, and I sometimes I get impressed with how motivated I can be. I probably need to take a bit of a break. So yes, I've done well with that, with my levels of motivation, and something I could possibly do better each and every day as I progress towards my future is speak a bit more of my truth. I've noticed yesterday that and it's only early here, guys, but I noticed yesterday that sometimes I find it difficult to speak up in certain situations, because of being judged or something. But it's a work in progress, something I'm certainly aware of, and something that I try to change more and more each day. Ty, what about you, mate? What's something you've done well? today?
I have a number of things that I am
Good.
working towards accomplishing, like writing a book and being healthier and getting myself, getting the word out about what it is that I do. And so I've got these 11 things that I have listed every day, 11 small tasks, not big things.
Yeah.
And if I hit 8 out of 11, I count the day a success. So I hit 8 out of 11 today. I hit 8 out of 11 yesterday. So I guess I've had a couple of successful days in a row, and those things kind of help keep me moving forward towards my goals.
Something you could possibly work on tomorrow, man?
Tomorrow, yeah, probably taking it a little easy. I need to take a page out of your book, Danny. I have definitely been go lately, and rest and recuperation is a big part of my program, and making sure that I rejuvenate myself so that I can continue to be of service to other people.
Good work, mate. Thank you so much. I love that personal inventory. It's such an important part. I'll just mention again, if you're joining us, guys, for the first time, welcome. If you're rejoining us, we appreciate your support. One of the things we're going to showcase over this season, basically, is highlighting like what it was like for individuals, and what it's like now. And that's why we've got you on the show. Ty, is there anything you wanted to say, Joey, before we?
I mean, just that I could relate to, I really could relate to going too hard. And, I had a conversation with somebody that I'm working with, a coach. And, that's my daily battle, is a lot of times I do, which is great, especially if you've been in a place where you're stuck and don't see a way out. It's good to be taking action. But if I don't, slow down, look up, allow, then I miss opportunities and I really miss life. So I can really relate to, being aware that I need to slow down and rest and restore, like Ty said, and to be a little more present. And, I've heard it put like, a human doing or a human being. And I could easily fall into the human doing category and forget to look up or enjoy life or take care of myself. So Thank you for sharing that, Ty. I really related.
No, thank you.
Guys, thank you everyone who's dropping your comments. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Joey and Ty, what was your lowest, Ty? Like tell us about where you come from, what it was like.
Yeah, that's a complicated question. So I will first start out just by acknowledging that as a person in recovery, I have what I sometimes call the gift basket. So I've got the gift basket that so many of us in recovery have. So I've got divorces, I've got rehab, I've got trips to jail, I've got thoughts of suicide and suicide attempts. So a lot of the things that unfortunately many of us go through, when we are stuck in our disease. But for me, the thing that I remember most vividly is living a double life and how difficult it was to maintain both of those things. For a big part of my recovery, was actually a pretty darn successful salesperson for a very large company, nationally recognized, making a bunch of money and doing professional stuff by day. But by night, I was out running the streets, not at home with my wife and my stepdaughter, looking for drugs and drinking, and really put on another persona. So by day I was Ty, and by night I had another name and a different attitude and wore different clothes and ran with a different crowd. And if you think that it can be tiring at the end of a week just being one person, man, being two people's rough. And especially when I was in a place where I didn't feel like I fit really in either one of those worlds, and actually hated both of the people that I was, but I felt like I was in a place where I couldn't really stop. And because I was either unable or unwilling to do the work that I needed to do in order to turn my life around, I went from a person that was pretty respected and making a whole bunch of money to, over a period of years, becoming a homeless addict, living on the streets of Seattle, not knowing where my next meal was going to come from or where I was going to sleep next, and eventually turned to a life of petty crime to support my habit, and ended up experiencing some pretty tough things. And the thing that's probably most remarkable about, a lot of people say their darkest moment is when is the moment right before they decide to get sober. For me, the story of me actually deciding to get sober is really, really unremarkable. As a matter of fact, it's probably remarkable how unremarkable it was. March 2nd, 2016, I'm in a hotel room with a friend of mine, and we're getting high and we're drinking, and nothing happened that night. I didn't get arrested. I didn't get kicked out of the hotel. There wasn't any drama. On March 3rd, I just decided that I was just tired. And I felt like the only option I had left, because I had exercised every other option. Becoming homeless wasn't the bottom, and going to jail a bunch of times wasn't the bottom, and feeling absolutely disconnected from the person that I used to be and from my family and friends was not the bottom. For me, the bottom was recognizing that I really only had one move left, and the one move left was to give up alcohol and drugs. And quite frankly, I was terrified by the prospect of giving up alcohol and drugs, because I could not imagine a life where I wouldn't constantly hate myself. And I couldn't imagine a life where I would be accepted and loved and actually be a normal walking around citizen again, because I hadn't been that for so long. And so I went into it. I went into recovery not because the effects of drugs and alcohol stopped working for me. I was still getting high and I was still getting drunk, but the consequences stopped working. And I entered the 12-step program, half hoping that it wouldn't work, quite frankly, because I didn't really want to give up drugs and alcohol, but I just knew I wanted my life to get better, and this was the last thing that I could think of that was gonna make a change. I had largely given up, the places I was hanging out. I'd given up most of the people I'd been hanging out with, and getting rid of the substances was the last thing left. And so I, was lucky enough to find my way into a recovery hall and have been in the program ever since, and life has steadily, gotten better. It hasn't been perfect. I haven't had a drink since March 2016, but drugs were a lot harder to kick. Several relapses that, quite frankly, I lied about in the program. I would go into the rooms and I would lie about the time that I had until, the last time I didn't, which was January 2019, when I made a vow to myself that I was going to live my life with complete integrity, which meant I had to do some stuff. So I fessed up to everything that I'd done before, to everybody in the program, and to my family and to my sponsor, and a huge weight was lifted off my shoulders. And I've been living 100% free ever since.
Congratulations, mate. It sounds like quite the familiar story to me. Also, something I've got one question. Something that has come up for me recently. Often, my mum was interviewed at one stage, and what she said, it was about my addiction and what it was like. But she said to me that sometimes she wished that I wasn't even here, that like our families in general, and this is for anyone out there who has a loved one maybe in addiction. Our families, my mum basically thought I was better off dead, right? And that's because she probably thought that I was suffering so bad. Now, when I reflect back on those times, it was like I was just doing what I had to do. All I cared about was getting on. I wasn't in the horrors and sad about being homeless under the bridge or wherever it was in my lowest, I was just driven to the next hit, I guess. So what that tells me is my mum wishing that maybe I was better off not being here was actually not even true. So the families worry more about us than how we worried about ourselves at the time. Do you relate to that? What was, when you look back at your old self in addiction and causing all that carnage, was it that hard at the time?
It wasn't hard at the time.
Yeah, that's
for me. I mean, it's never hard for the addict, right?
No.
I mean, I had the comfort of being able to get high and just kind of space out. It was really hard for my family, and as a matter of fact, kind of like you said with your mom, my family, especially my dad, because my dad was the one that I was the closest to, but my dad and my little sister, they emotionally had to disconnect from me. They just did. And the last time that I went to rehab, my dad said, we've been holding on. We've been getting your mail at the house. We were just holding on to it. We figured you were going to get sober. We were going to bury it.
Yeah.
It was a 50-50 proposition. So I am fully aware now of the position emotionally that I put my family, because it's really hard not to be resentful of someone that you love when they won't stop killing themselves. Right.
For sure.
And that, that is often one of the biggest struggles that many of the families of, of folks. I do a little bit of public speaking now, and I speak in audiences of family members of people who are still, knee deep in their addictions. And it's one of the things that folks talk about. They just being able to actually create a boundary where they still maintain love for their loved one without resenting them, but not enabling them. And it's a very delicate line to walk. My family had to do it too. I knew that I didn't get sober the next day, but I knew that I needed to start thinking about getting sober the last time I went to jail. The last time I went to jail was May 2015. And I called my dad and said, "Hey, I'm in jail again. Can you bail me out?" Because he bailed me out a few times before. And he said, "We've kind of decided that from now on, if you're in jail, you're just going to be in jail." And that let me know that what he did was he pushed the consequences of everything right back on me, which is exactly what he needed to do. And it was a hard decision for him, and it made me really mad at the time. But in retrospect, that was the very best thing that he could do. He was loving me the best way he knew how. And in that moment, what I needed was tough love. And that is what can be so difficult for families sometimes.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, that is super challenging. I could definitely relate to that. I know a lot of people who've died, family and friends and brothers and sisters in recovery who've died from this disease in one form or another. I've seen both sides of the coin. It's kind of like you're really not sure what to do, where the family obviously enabling doesn't necessarily work. And for me, which it sounds like it's very similar for you, Ty, is that, I was not going to get any type of help or even consider it until I was out of options. I was a taker. If you gave me an inch, I would take a mile. And so like all those, whether that be, a loss of a job or getting locked up, or like my family finally turning their back on me, was all really, really, really necessary for me. But I've seen that go, the other way. I've seen somebody, cut it, give up on their person who's out there, killing themselves with whatever addictive behavior they're running through, and them still not make it. So it's kind of like you don't know. Like sometimes I think, sometimes I wonder if it's in the cards, like who makes it and who doesn't. However, I also had a cousin of mine. He died from this disease. He was murdered in a drug deal gone bad when we were young, and his family, enabled him, and it continued, and then we got the phone call. He was no longer around. So it's really hard to know the right thing to do. I think in the end, nothing that anybody does or says can get somebody sober, and anything that they do or say can get somebody drunk or high. I think it's an inner game, and it's a higher forces game, so we're sure glad that you made it through, and there's so much that you talked about that we could talk more about, but I definitely would love to hear. So you got into recovery. You had a few slip ups. You kept getting back on your feet. When did it start? When did you start to realize that your lived experience and the adversity that you have overcome you'd be able to pivot that into a service-based business and nonprofit to contribute to the world? When did you start formulating that plan? What steps did you take? And how are you helping people today with your lived experience?
I probably started thinking about how I could give back to other folks, outside of being in the rooms and being an active member of a 12-step program. I started thinking about that in 2018. And initially, I kind of thought that I would do sober houses, because I stayed in a couple of sober houses and they were really instrumental in me being able to be in an environment with people that were looking to do the same things that I was. Unfortunately, because of the high expense of the real estate market in Seattle, sober houses really weren't a viable option for me, from where I was at the time. But the other thing that I kept thinking about was my experience with employment. and coming back from where I was. So before I, became a homeless meth addict and a petty criminal on the streets of Seattle, I had an MBA from, one of the finest universities in the country. I had been working in corporate America for 10 to 15 years and doing really well. But when I got sober and started looking for work in 2016, the first job I was able to get because of my criminal record was part-time as a janitor. And now that's honorable work and it's completely necessary work. But I was just really surprised that somebody who had been fortunate enough to have the background that I did would be so limited in their option. And as I started thinking more about the ways that I could give back, I just thought about folks who haven't been as lucky as me and what would their employment experience be like. And born out of that was the nonprofit that I run now, which is called Recovery Career Services. Recoveryandwork.org is the website. And what it is an attempt to really provide coaching and employment guidance for the two groups of folks that are kind of like where I was at different points in my life. So there's people that are completely starting over, and people in recovery from addiction, homelessness, or past criminal justice involvement that maybe have been out of the workforce for a while and are trying to figure out if they've got a criminal record, how do I get back into the workforce? How do I tell my story to that employer? Because how you tell the story is important. You should always tell the truth, but you should be strategic about how you tell it. So I get an opportunity to work with people on a pro bono basis and help them with those things, and also put together resumes and mock interviews. And then the other group of people are folks that are working professionals. I call these the house is on fire people. So there's something going on. They need to take some action, but folks that are still working in their jobs, but those jobs have been impacted by alcohol or drugs in some way. And if they don't take some action pretty soon, they might lose their job and need to pick up and go somewhere else. So I work with folks to help them put together a plan. Number one, to figure out whether they want to save their job, because if they want to be sober, maybe the job they're working in isn't the best one for them. Maybe there's alcohol or drugs pretty readily available at the job. And so it doesn't make sense for them to stay there. But if it does make sense for them to stay there, then how do we put a plan together based on that individual's needs that helps them to keep their job? And then eventually, if they decide they want to leave, they can leave on their own terms, as opposed to being escorted out by security with their stuff in a box.
Cool, man. It's great work that you're doing. It's so essential. So, and sometimes we just need a little bit of direction around that stuff,
Yeah.
It's one of those suggested things that you sort of don't put yourself in risky situations. And as you just mentioned, sometimes there's drugs and alcohol in the workplace. And certainly in the early days, I know that it's really important to stay away from that. And I work in a drug and alcohol rehab, and it's one of the things we always sort of suggest people do. It's sort of common knowledge. It's not what I did. I actually got my first job in recovery was a barman. Which, and look, my justification was that I wasn't an alcoholic. Well, I know I was an alcoholic, but I didn't have too much of a problem with alcohol. But yeah, I got out of it as soon as I could. But I love what a wonderful thing you're doing, Ty.
Thank you. I really feel lucky to do it. And the other thing is that I want to mention is companies do a really great job of sending employees to rehab or health insurance also. But once somebody leaves rehab and they go back to work, there's like no support there. And now they're trying to navigate this world that in many ways is really new to them, right? So they're back at work. Maybe they've got a bunch of stuff on the line at work because of the way that they were conducting themselves as an employee before they went to rehab. And now they're back trying to navigate a new world without the drugs and the alcohol that they were relying on. And the people at work, they might want to understand and support them, but they don't really get it. And so it's not their fault. And so it's just, I'm there to, try to provide that support to get people through to the next place.
Can I just say, like, in those situations, it really is up to us as the individual to put in the work, isn't it? We can't rely on anyone, really. Like, and if you can get that attitude, I feel like it's going to help you go a long way. Not that you can't rely on anyone, but take responsibility for our own situation and put things in place to keep us safe, and something that I always look, I put at the forefront of my mind,
Well, it's that getting into action thing, right? Yeah. So not relying on, not pointing the finger of blame at other people, taking responsibility and taking the actions necessary to live our way into a new way of thinking, right?
Yeah. So true. We can wish and dream and hope all we want, but if we don't put in the action ourselves to make shit happen, it probably is not going to happen. And even if it did, then someone else did it for you. You know, that's not the
Right.
answer. That's not the answer.
Well, and everybody, obviously everybody needs help, but people like to help those that are trying to help themselves. And I don't think it's any coincidence that all along the way, as so many of us in recovery are making our comeback journeys, as we're taking the next right indicated step, that these people just magically show up in our lives at just the right time to provide us with assistance, right? Nobody does it alone, but you got to be out walking on the road to run into people on the road that are going to help you along the way.
Absolutely. Good stuff. Hey, just before we jump to the next section, I just want to give a shout out to everyone who's dropped their comments. Hey, Vinny and Maddie, we love you too. Gabe, we really appreciate you being here and supporting us. And Lisa from Darcyville, much love. I know you always join us. And also to Gene, my man. I know, again, we appreciate your support. And look, mate, you're doing some wonderful stuff. Hey, let me ask you a question right now, Ty. On a scale of 1 to 10, right? 0, I'm incredibly ungrateful and unhappy, and 10, I'm over the moon, and life could not be better. What would you give yourself? What number would you give yourself on that scale today?
I think it probably runs on a range. So generally, it's probably anywhere from 7 to 9. Frankly, I do a pretty good job of being grateful, but what's really key for me is recognizing. So, on a very personal note, so my highest ideal, the thing that's most important to me is freedom. Yeah. And because the most important thing to me is freedom, I seek that out in over and over and over again in every area of my life. So when it comes to my work, when it comes to my personal relationships, when it comes to the recreational activities I engage in, freedom is like my number one thing. But so often the things that really are good in my life that I'm grateful for don't seem like freedom. I'm in a great relationship with a woman who is also in recovery. We've been together almost 3 years. And although it's a great relationship, sometimes my mind tells me that, it's not freedom, right? It tells me that, real freedom is being single, and real freedom is being able to date whoever I want and run the streets at all hours of the night, even though I go to bed at 8:30 and run the streets at all hours of the night and just do whatever I want, right? But the truth is that there is an incredible amount of freedom in being in a relationship with someone who is loving and consistent and allows me to be my real self and to be fully me. There's a tremendous amount of freedom in that. And so the thing that I have to focus on when it comes to gratitude is recognizing that those things that I'm so grateful for, don't look at them as curses. Constantly remind myself that they are blessings and reframe them to think of these things as freedom. When I was on the street, I used to think I was free from having to go to work every day and, having to punch a clock and, tell somebody when I'm going to lunch and all that stuff. But, there's a freedom to knowing where your next meal's coming from and sleeping in a bed. You know what I mean? So it's really easy for me to some days look at my job that I really love and say, God, this is such a grind, and I wish I didn't have all this obligation. But really what I have is a lot of blessings and a lot of freedom in my life as a result of doing some work and showing up and being present in the lives of myself and the people that love me. So it's a constant battle, as I'm sure you know, but most days I manage to stay in the right place.
Sometimes we need to get out of the way, don't we? And just acknowledge the wonderful things we have. And I've got the disease of more and the disease of next. I want more and what's next, constantly, always. All right, guys, amazing, Ty. Thank you so much for sharing us. We wrap up our show, and thank you everyone who's joined us. It's good to have you with us, Kenny. Gabe was asking about you earlier, and Pete, thank you very much for joining us as well. So, Ty, at the end of our show, we love to share one of our tips, tricks, or hacks to plug into the higher forces of gratitude, and we wrap it up with maybe a helpful tip that you've found helpful to increase your levels of happiness. Joey, you want to kick us off, mate?
Sure. I love this part of the show. I always like to kick off, just share that, gratitude to me is a spiritual practice. Whatever to me, when I think of spirituality, I think of shifting perspective. And the quickest way for me to shift perspective is for me to practice gratitude. And it's important for me to mention, not only to hear myself say it out loud, but to stress that to anybody who may be listening, is that we don't need to be grateful to practice gratitude. The practice of gratitude generates gratitude. So the feelings of gratitude is a byproduct of the practice. So whenever I'm thinking about practicing gratitude, I need it to be short, quick, simple, and effective. So I usually like to keep it pretty simple, and it needs to be consistent for me. Something that I've been doing lately that I'd like to share. I have a regular gratitude practice, obviously, because I'm sharing about it. And I usually do some gratitude in the morning, and I do some gratitude at night. But I went through a little period where I was struggling. I started to set an alarm on my phone for every 2 hours. And every 2 hours when my alarm went off, that was telling me, okay, Joe, like, start thinking about your blessing. Start thinking about what you're grateful for. And I always like to say that I like to stretch for new things, and I like them to make them to be seemingly insignificant things that I typically take for granted. So if you're having trouble practicing gratitude or implementing a gratitude practice, that's a really good way to remind yourselves to get your head in the right place, because the force of gratitude to me is the most powerful higher force that there is.
Beautiful stuff, Joey. I've been talking about this a little bit the last couple of days, and it's one of the groups that I run at work, actually. But increasing your levels of happiness. It's a little exercise that I talk often about. And do you know that when we write down a gratitude list, maybe we acknowledge 5 things that we're grateful on paper, we can increase our levels of happiness by apparently 2 to 4%, which is okay, but not the best, right? But you can increase your levels of happiness by up to 19% when we have a think about someone who's had a positive impact on your life today. Give that person a call and express your gratitude to them for the positive impact that they've had on your life today. Science suggests that this can increase our levels of happiness by up to 19%. And so I just want to encourage anyone out there who's wanting to hit a happier level, just to try that little exercise. It can be quite an awkward exercise. Maybe say when you make the call that somebody's asked you to make this call, but it's amazing what can happen. And the feedback I've gotten from it has always been amazing, mate. Ty, what about you, mate? What's your tip to increase your levels of happiness or gratitude, mate?
Danny, bring in the stats. I'm impressed. The thing that works best for me is not only making a gratitude list, but making sure that I list why I'm grateful for that thing. Because, for me, it is very important to acknowledge why I'm so grateful for that particular thing, because it helps to deepen just how lucky I am. Things could have been way worse for me. And I'm incredibly fortunate to, still have most of my teeth and be in relatively good health and have my family back and to be living the life that I'm living in the place that I am. So I always make sure that I attach a why to whatever that gratitude item is to cement it in my mind.
Amazing stuff, guys. Thanks so much for joining us, Ty.
Thank you.
Keep killing it, brother. Keep helping people. The more we give, the more the universe provides. Joey, thank you so much for your time, mate.
It's been a great show. Thank you, Danny. Thank you, Ty. I like that, adding a little extra layer to deepen that gratitude. I'm gonna add that. Thank you. I picked up a new tip today.
Thanks. Glad I could help and be of service.
And
that's why you're on the show, brother.
Thank you to everyone who's joined us. We've had quite a few viewers on it, lots of comments. We really appreciate you guys. We'll be back next week with a new guest. Next week we've got Sammy joining us on the show. So guys, thanks again for your time. We're going to wrap it up. Stay with us for a sec. I'll end the broadcast, Ty. See you later, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.